everyone, welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm joined again by Kyle. Kyle, it's been a minute since you've joined me.
It has, yeah. No, I'm back here. Trying to be more co-op now, since I know it's a visual medium and not just through, ear holes. So I'm trying to spruce up a little bit for everybody in the audience. I'm excited for this one. I really enjoy co-hosting with you, so it's a fun time.
Yeah, I think so our listeners know, I think you were feeling like maybe I didn't enjoy having you as a co-host because you're like, well, did I do a bad job? Like, can I come back on? I'm like, no, you're welcome to come on. I was just waiting for the perfect guest, and I found the perfect guest. So I was like, Kyle, you're in the next one. So today
Awesome.
We're joined by Walter Nelson, and he's gone through a career progression that he's in construction defect claims, but now he's in-house with Turner Construction in like kind of an internal broker type position, which is really, really interesting. And I've been talking to Walter for years, and I finally was able, the stars aligned that we were finally able to schedule him to come on. And also perfect for you guys both just love music and rock and roll.
Love it. Great. Fellow rock and roll traveler. It's awesome.
So, we're going to talk a little bit of that and a little about construction. So with that, let's bring him in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.
Good afternoon, Walter. Welcome to this episode of Claims Never Sleep. I'm so happy to have you. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. I know we've been working on this for years, literally.
Yes, I was going to say this.
Happening.
A lot of these podcasts, I'm like, it's been a labor of love. We've, talked about this, but we've talked about having this guest on for a long time. But literally, I think it's been 2.5 years that you and I have been chatting about the podcast and you coming on, and the ships finally aligned. So I'm so happy. I'm so happy you're here, and we finally got it in order.
Absolutely.
And when we started talking, I don't want to say that was a career or two ago, because not a career or two ago, but when we started talking, you were at 2 or 3 places ago, and now you've made kind of like a shift, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But when I talk to most of the guests who come on the show, obviously we're here to talk about claims and claims management and all of that, but everyone got into this career in such different ways. And I'm curious to hear about, how you got into claims. Was it something that you fell into? That's what most people do. Most people just fall into this. But there's been a few that go to school for it, or they had a parent or whatever it may be. So what's your story?
Yeah, no, I fell into it. I went to college, got a business degree with an emphasis on entrepreneurial management. So I ultimately wanted to own my own business, was my grand idea coming out of college. It went to, and I don't know if this still happens, I believe it may, but in the era of when I went to school, they used to have companies recruit on campus, at the end of the semester. So there's a lot of companies. I ended up talking to a retail drugstore that, sold me on this idea of, with my degree, I could, kind of run a store, and it would be like my own little business. So that's the job I took out of college, and found out really quick that I went to college to avoid a job like that, in my in the sense of having to work weekends and odd hours was really bothered me. I didn't mind the job per se. It was actually kind of interesting, but I didn't like the hours. So long story short, I started looking for something else a couple of years in, and went to a job recruiter. And back when you'd walk in a door, to a brick and mortar building, and the first thing they brought up was a claims job with SAFECO insurance. And I don't know if it was because they just came in the door, or they thought it would be a good fit, but I said, sure, that sounds great. I had actually a few friends that were doing claims at the time, believe it or not. From I moved around a little bit, so these people lived in other parts of the country, and didn't really know a lot about it other than that's what they did. And so went in for the interview, obviously got the job, and the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. It's funny, like when I after I graduated college, like the online application thing was starting, like that was definitely how you were applying to things. But I remember my first job, one of my colleagues, he literally like walked door to door with his resume to businesses and walked, and that's how he got that job, because they were so impressed that they're like, wow, we can't believe that you came to our reception desk and was like, here, I'd like to work here. That would never happen these days.
Very entrepreneurial spirit on their part. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm giving my 16-year-old daughter now the same advice. She's looking for a job, and I said, well, why don't you walk into places, and specific things she wants to do and places she wants to work. And she's like, oh, that's a good idea. So
yeah,
it definitely would stand out.
That's what I told her. I said, in this day and age, yeah, you would stand out, because most kids are just applying online, obviously, or what have you. So
yeah.
What did you want to do? Like, did you have a specific type of business that you were interested in opening after college?
For myself?
Yeah.
Oh, I really didn't know, for certain. I mean, my passions were personally were in music and sports. So, I had no idea what I could do with that, but that's, I thought, well, you got to work in something that you love. Right. And that's the ideal. And, but I couldn't think of a business, so I thought, well, I'll get some experience, in the real business world, and then I'll figure it out. And, well, here we are, right?
Yeah.
Insurance 30 years later. But yeah. I really didn't know.
I mean, maybe now you can open up a sports and music memorabilia store on the side.
There you go.
There you go.
I don't know how much money you're going to make doing that, but it might just be fun.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you get into SAFECO. What sort of claims were you handling there?
SAFECO was a great starting point. Little did I know, because they had an incredible training program at the time, where you arguably spent about 3 months training on all different lines of business. You could complete it quicker, which I did. I was done in a little over a month to a month and a half, as I recall. And so they put me on a kind of a combination of a business, auto, and homeowners claims right off the bat, and learning those two lines. And then within a year, I had started hearing the rumblings, all foreign to me at the time, of construction defect and, general liability claims and people who were doing that. I worked at a regional office at the time for SAFECO. So there were 500 employees in this office. Wow. And so I didn't know a lot of the people yet, obviously, but I kept hearing about construction defect, and that's really where you want to go if you're going to stay in claims. And so they actually approached me, my management team, and said, hey, we think you might be good at doing this GL stuff. Do you have any interest? And I said, yeah. And so they just moved me into doing CD claims within a year, and it just took off from there. So,
and why was that, or do you know why that was the advice? Like that's where you want to go?
At the time, as I recall, it was, it was just, it was not new per se, but CD was probably about 10 to 15 years old. And it was just, you really started to take off. Mm-hmm. And as I would say, so I think they felt like, it was kind of a new, creative, innovative type of claim that wasn't, that was getting its own kind of fuel, so to speak, in the industry. And, I was told that, that typically people who were in that line of business made a little more money on average than other kinds of adjusters, because it was considered to be more complex and more involved. And, so that was my understanding at the time.
Yeah. Well, more money is always
especially when you're, at any point, but when you're young too, it was like, yeah, more money, sure.
And when you say construction defect, are those like accidents at a construction site involving workers that they're either falling from something or something's falling on them? Are those the type of claims you're talking about?
At that point in time, absolutely. Today, that's, and I'm sure back then that's what, part of what those entailed. At the time, it was really about subcontractors working on tract home projects is what was really I was getting involved in initially. So it was property damage, but it was the standard, what I would call the standard CD claim of a bunch of tract homes, and a plaintiff attorney comes in and signs up a bunch of homeowners, and you insure one of the subs. So.
And do you mean like at the time were you seeing, and like those early stages, were you seeing it was almost like issues with an entire like development, and like the attorney coming in going after the builder and the subs for that entire development with whatever defect claim there was?
Yeah, they were basically, my understanding is they would come in and they would send out letters to all the individual homeowners in that community, try and get them to sign up. And then, oftentimes back then, and they may still do this, I don't get involved in a lot of the tract home stuff anymore. But they would hold meetings, say, we're going to have a meeting and talk about your home. And so these people would show up and be like, oh, are you seeing this? Are you seeing that? Little water leaks or cracking in your cement or foundations, or, flat work, et cetera, cracking in your stucco. A lot of this was California at the time. So a lot of stucco, exterior stucco work. And then, they would, I think, sell them on this, we can get you all this money for your home to repair these issues. And that's kind of how it took off with the plaintiffs enticing homeowners community. And they would just go community to community, throughout, for all builders. They didn't focus on just, they'd hit the big builders, they'd hit the smaller builders, all of them.
And you'd mentioned the stucco claims, because I've heard, I've worked in construction defect for some time too. And stucco claims, I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s were really, really common. Was that like kind of the meat and the juice of what you're seeing then, was that those stucco claims, or was it the whole gamut?
Yeah, there were typically the stucco stereotypical items you would see that were often the big, the big money ones, I would call them, that would be the draw. Stucco, window leaks, roof leaks, things of that nature were the big ones. Yeah.
So you're at SAFECO for some time, and then what's your next move?
The next move was, I got I was working on a claim, and this fits into kind of like the whole industry for me, and kind of how I've built my network, so to speak, of people that I know and have worked with and built good relationships with. I was working on a claim where I had a co-carrier at another company, and she told me that they were going to be creating a whole new department, taking claims in-house from a TPA that they had farmed out for a line of business they had. And, would I be interested in interviewing? And I said, sure. I was, about 2 years into SAFECO. I really liked SAFECO, but, always open to, I didn't know what the opportunity might entail, or, if I could make more money, what have you.
More money.
More money. Exactly. Let's just be real, right? It was not the money at that point. And so, yeah, I went and interviewed, and, long story short, got the job. And it was really interesting, because it was, I felt like it did kind of draw upon my entrepreneurial spirit and interest, because, we had to kind of build this from scratch, taking it back in-house from the TPA, and like I said, creating we were all new hires, a whole new department. So it was really fun experience.
Yeah.
And that was with Reliance Insurance. And we probably all know what happened there. I was there when it happened. Unfortunately,
we might not all know. Are you able to share what happened? Or
oh, sure, yeah. They ended up unfortunately going out of business, going bankrupt.
Oh.
But that company was out of New York. It was run by two brothers, and my understanding, I guess one of the brothers, I believe, was quite famous for his high lifestyle, and he like on TV famous, as far as being profiled. He had a very exclusive, like two-story, a penthouse type or 2-level, I guess you would call it, penthouse apartment in Manhattan. He had a very exclusive art collection, things of that nature. And apparently I think there was some odd stuff going on there with the company money and things is what ultimately, and, poor decision-making brought the company down, unfortunately. But we had a great group of people, and it was a good run while I was there. So it's unfortunate, but.
And you got to it kind of build it out, right? So you got and that itself is a very marketable skill set that makes you very attractive to other carriers or other employers, because you can be like, look, I came in and I did this and we built this team and we built this up, and it wasn't your fault what happened at the top.
Exactly. Well, and the nice thing while I was there is I got I got an opportunity. I was only there 5 years, like I said, but I got an opportunity to advance internally within my own adjuster level to to different over my time, different job titles, getting promotions and different levels of claims exposure to, and then ultimately towards the end I was promoted into a management role, and I had a group of 6 adjusters that reported to me, and I ended up getting we went out and we were hiring. This all happened, and then it was so sad. I went out and interviewed and hired all these people, so I got experience doing that. I was kind of put in charge of the new, a lot of the newer, less experienced adjusters, because they felt I could train them well in the way I approached people and the way I approached my desk when I was on a desk and stuff. So that was really fun. But then 8 months later, I had to turn around and let all these people go, because that's when everything went. That's how quickly it changed, and that was not a fun experience, obviously, but it was a valuable experience just to go through that for me, and unfortunate for those folks who just been hired 8 months before, and were very intrigued with being able to learn about most of them did not have construction defect experience, and they wanted to get in that field, and here was the opportunity, and whatever happened, unfortunately. So
when you were going, I guess, rebuilding or building the in-house group up from the TPA, were there things that you guys had to kind of redo or reorganize that the TPA was doing, or I guess how did you build up that practice within Alliance?
I mean, we were technically a TPA ourselves. It was an internally created TPA by the company, so we actually worked for Reliance, but we're in a TPA capacity. But it was a little different because of that. They had a greater level of comfort, a greater level of trust with us being internal employees. So we saw as the claims came in, and we started reviewing them, you could tell where the gaps were, so to speak, or the things were not where they should be, not up to par, not followed up on. So it was a matter of just literally kind of going through each one by one and figuring out what needed to be done and what was lacking and what needed to be caught up on and followed up on. So it was kind of across the board. Some were in better shape than others and didn't need as much help. Or, it was just like I said, it was a very kind of step-by-step process, I guess, is the best way to describe it.
So when all that happened, though, did you personally have some warning as to a transition period, or were you also caught kind of off guard because you had to I'm assuming those people, everyone that you hired, got let go, but did you know it was coming down the pike, or were you a little blindsided?
It was a little of both. I felt there were rumors, we were hearing things in the industry, what have you. We did because there were a group of us that obviously were talking about it internally and concerned, and we did approach management above us and ask about it, and initially we were kind of told it was really nothing to be concerned with or worry about, everything's going to be fine, and that obviously proved not to be the case. So when it actually came down, it was kind of a little bit of a shock, after that discussion. But I understand business, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's it's a fine line, and I don't blame anyone internally. We had a good group of managers too, and they were in a tough position. I understand that.
So then, what was your next step?
Next step was kind of a little bit of a rebuild. I felt at that point. Obviously, I not obviously, but I stayed on through that transitional period, back in because I had no one to manage, obviously, so I was back in an individual contributor role. We transitioned to California Insurance Guarantee because they didn't have staff to handle those claims. Now that they're in the bankruptcy stage, so but that was just really mundane and boring because you're the last in line, in that you're not actively involved. You're just if exhaustion happens by other carriers, et cetera, then it comes to you, but you're just monitoring things. So I knew I was in a dead end role. Yeah. So moved on, actually went into the TPA world. And I had an opportunity. A friend of mine worked at a place and he said, "Hey, we're hiring." And so I ended up out at working with Carl Warren and Company at that point. And that ended up being a really good experience because I got the opportunity. It was the first time I got the opportunity to work on OSIP and CSIP type policies there. So, and some of that larger exposure stuff, and never had had any exposure to that type of a policy before. So that was a great opportunity for me in that regard.
So can you for some of our listeners might not know OSIP or CSIP are, so can you explain like what those policies entail?
Sure. Yeah. So people probably are familiar, obviously, with the standard, what I would call standard renewable GL policy that lasts 1 year, and it's issued to an individual subcontractor, or general contractor of any nature. An OSIP or CSIP, and that stands for Owner Controlled Insurance Program or Contractor Controlled Insurance Program. So owner, obviously, by definition, would be the owner of the project. They could take out a policy, or the contractor, generally being the general contractor for the CSIP. But what those policies do is they basically envelope or enroll all the applicable subcontractors under that policy. So it's a single policy that covers an entire project. They typically run a couple of years instead of the standard year. They can be extended at times, usually up to 5 years maximum. But if the project runs longer, because obviously some of those projects aren't going to finish in a year. So it's a good program in that regard. It has its challenges. Sometimes the limits aren't significant enough for the potential exposure for all those parties, because now instead of having 30 policies of $1 million available, you got one policy that might be $2 or $4 million available for claims. Sometimes they can also be what they call burning limits, which means any of the investigative or defense costs that are incurred during the claim process would erode the aggregate limit available. So it can be a challenge in that regard, but that's in essence what the product does and how it works.
I mean, in the litigation atmosphere, I would imagine too that helps with lessening the pointing of the fingers, because there's just one policy and it's just that's the umbrella, right? And then any claims would fall under that umbrella. So then you kind of, as you always want, the plaintiff's perfect scenario is having a case with 10 defendants and they're all saying they did it. Now under those policies, I think there would be less finger pointing, right?
Correct. I mean, I think that's part of the model. Exactly. Is that it streamlines the claim process. It streamlines the litigation. Arguably, you generally should have one defense firm defending all of the entities under the OSIP or CSIP, exactly. And then you have no finger pointing because the liabilities all falls to one policy and one policy limit under that structure. So exactly, doesn't always, as you can imagine in what we do, doesn't always work that way. But that's the intent, and that's how it should go. Exactly.
Yeah. I've talked to other people about these as well, because I think it really helps assist too, like the subs, because I feel like a lot, especially like the unsophisticated subs don't a lot of times understand how contracts run and that it all rolls downhill. And then you sometimes have these subs who are, they might be the best, tile guy out there, but they have, they might not be great about their insurance coverage and their additional insurance coverage. So I feel as if those types of policies really serve them as well, because it protects the GCs, but I think it can help a lot of the little guys a lot more.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it takes out that whole, like you said, a kind of a misunderstanding or lack of understanding of how that process works. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had over the years with contractors on the standard policies, and they just don't understand the business side of it too. I mean, obviously they're running a business, they're in business to make money, but they want you to fight that claim. I didn't do anything wrong. This is ridiculous. Don't pay them any money. And they, and you try to explain to them, look, once the claim's tendered to us, we have control over how the process goes. And we're also in business to make money. I understand what you're saying, but I'm not going to spend $500,000 defending a claim I can settle for $100.
No.
And the irony of all that, right, is you get the same guy calling you, complaining about, why are my insurance rates going up? And it's like, well, if we can limit the amount of money that we spend on this claim, whether it's defense or indemnity, that's going to help you and help the industry on the insurance rate side too. So if you want me to, pay $500,000 defending $100,000 claim, you are going to see your insurance rates go through the roof, because we're going to try and recover that money, of course. Yeah. So, yeah.
And it is funny though, a lot of times, and I shouldn't say it's funny, it's expected. When you talk to these subs or contractors, whoever it is, they're like, no, I did the best job. And then you have an expert come in, you're like, okay, I believe you, but let's have, and someone on the outside maybe look at the work that was done and the damage that is claimed, and let's see, maybe the work had something to do with it, and a lot of times they feel so personally offended, but I'm like, look, I can try, I can understand it, but I'm not an expert in roofing. I mean, I need an expert in roofing to look at the work that you've done. And then a lot of times they do get offended. I'm like, I'm sorry, but we want to know ahead of time where the risk is. And I'd love to defend it to, to the very end based on your word. But if we get an expert and says, oh, well, there's these 3 issues, and maybe we can resolve this before spending that $50,000.
Right.
It's well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Is for these types of policies, can the individual subcontractors supplement by taking out their own excess policies, or is that something that they cannot do by being part of the O chip or C chip?
Yeah, they can certainly protect themselves however they like. And there's an option to enroll or not enroll for every entity too. If you choose you don't want to be a part of this product and supply your own insurance, you're welcome to do that as far as the base insurance as well, the GL. Yeah. But yeah, they definitely can protect themselves against any individual liability that they feel could come from that through excess or what have you. But I was thinking about something, Megan, that you were saying, just to piggyback on talking about the settlements and the things of that nature. And I didn't do anything wrong. The other thing that's always been interesting to me over the years is, you talk to somebody who says, oh, I've, a claim comes in and they said, I've done business with this same entity that's now suing me for 30 years. I've worked with this guy and we've never had an issue, and we've never had a claim, and we've never had a lawsuit against each other. And oh, by the way, we're so tight, we don't even have contracts.
Of course not.
It's all verbal.
Yeah, and they're best man at my wedding. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have seen that more times than I want.
Exactly.
it happens way too often, and it's like, oh yeah, we've been friends. We grew up on the same block.
Yeah, our families vacation together. I mean, it's unbelievable how close these people are, and then it's like, well, money and business can change relationships, unfortunately, and that's what you're seeing here.
Until shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Are these types of policies getting more popular in the area where you're adjusting claims? Because I know in New York, at least, like, and when I say labor law claims, just that is these construction accident claims.
Yeah.
And like,
right.
At least from my experience, which I mean, other people in my office are a bit more than I do, but most of them, or if not all of them, are still the classic. Everybody has their own policy, and then we're doing the loss transfer game, pointing fingers up, down, left, right.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's something that I at least have not seen much of in the New York market. Is it something that is now being, I guess, encouraged, or from a market perspective, more popular on the West Coast where you are?
Yeah, I would say everywhere, because I've been involved in claims over the years in all markets across the U.S. And I agree that what you're saying. Yes, I've seen this product grow and become far more popular on many projects throughout the United States over the years. So I think it's definitely expanding.
Yeah. Well, and actually, this is like a great segue though too, because where you are now, like you've changed from the carrier TPA side. Now you're kind of like, and you could probably describe it better than I am, but you're kind of like an in-house TPA for a very large construction company. And I imagine you're seeing more of those where you sit now, the projects that Turner takes over or takes on. I imagine these are very popular to have because they're quite large projects.
Oh yes, exactly. Yeah, the majority of what we do here is under our own CSIP, or we're part of an OSIP with the owner entity that we contract to be the GC on the project for.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale of projects that they work on, compared to what I've done in the past is quite impressive. So. It's football stadiums.
Yes.
They're involved right now in building the Buffalo Bills new stadium and the Tennessee Titans, the two that are being built right now by the NFL teams.
Yeah.
The only two. They were involved in SoFi in Los Angeles, and they were involved in the Intuit Dome across the parking lot for the Clippers, in Los Angeles too. They just sent out a message. I've only been here since January, and so I'm still learning about the company and such, and the history of what they've been involved in. But they sent out a email with the Super Bowl that just took place, saying that for the last 4 Super Bowls, including this one, that for both teams, Turner has been involved in either the building of or the reconstruction of their stadiums. For all those teams. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a name that everyone knows.
Yes. Yeah. You see their banners everywhere when you're driving down the street, right, on projects. Exactly.
So just so our listeners know, explain a little bit like how you came over to Turner and like kind of the role that you're in, because I think it's when you and I are talking about it, I think it's like really unique, but it's also a little bit of a pivot for you from where you were before. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The division of the company I work for is called TSIB. So it stands for Turner Surety Insurance Brokerage. So we are in essence an in-house broker for Turner. We also market to outside entities to perform similar roles. So we have different departments, obviously, within that group that help with, securing insurance for projects. And, so my side, or my role is in essence still in the claims world, but I don't directly handle claims anymore. We have carriers, obviously, just as anyone else would. I've worked for carriers, as we've talked about over the years, or worked for TPA on behalf of a carrier. So now I'm more in a oversight, kind of an advocate, which I'm sure people are familiar with that with brokerages, an advocate role on behalf of Turner. And so I deal directly with the carriers and the building divisions that we have. My territory I have a territory, so mine is Northern California. And I inherited some claims that are outside of my territory that I'm still working on, but my going forward, all basically California based for the most part. But Northern California and San Diego, we're doing the San Diego Airport.
Oh wow!
Terminal, nice. Yeah, the whole new terminal. I actually got a chance to tour that project, and it's going to be done in September. So it's about 75% done based on when they started it right now. But so I got to walk through the whole terminal shell that's now in place, and they haven't got all the details in, like a couple of the bathrooms are finished, things of that nature, but none of the vendor things, none of the ticketing counters are in. They're working on that stuff right now, but it was amazing to see that, and really interesting. I got to walk every aspect of that job from, all underground, the baggage claim areas and all the carousels that carry that stuff into the terminal, and, got the behind the scenes view, so to speak. Right. And it was really interesting. So,
well, and not to cut you off, but thinking about all of the things that need to go into like an airport terminal. So you have to think of the security and the flow, and how many people have to be involved in the design and like engineering. It's so massive. And like football stadium, same thing, or any stadium, you have to think about just the flow of people and how you want people to flow through there and not get bottlenecked. And it's especially true for stadiums, but airports too. You don't want, funnels of people getting too close together. So it creates traffic jams, so to speak,
right.
But then just thinking about I think about all the potential risk spotting when you're walking through there.
Right.
And, and in our world, you're looking at, okay, it's is this grade too, is this grade too steep? Could this be, a falling hazard, all of the things. So it's pretty incredible because it's a massive, massive project.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I was just, and I agree with you. Just seeing where they're at in the process was so impressive. But I think the same way. And so taking into consideration, it may sound silly, but it's like, gee, how does this all come together? Like you said, I mean, from a design to a construction to it's like the coordination, and obviously for these people who do it every day, it seems seamless to them. When you're talking to them, it's like, but to me, it's like, wow, I'm trying to take the thought process from the beginning to the end, and not being someone who's involved in that daily. It's like, the coordination and cooperation level amongst all those parties is very impressive to obviously it happens every day, and, and it's a world I'm involved in, but still it's astounding to me, how they accomplish these things and get them done correctly as well.
Yeah. And even down to bathroom, placement and design of bathrooms to allow for, again, flow of crowds, high volume, high traffic. It's incredible. And you think about like SoFi Stadium, and you have, something like the Taylor Swift concert, and you have even more people there than its intended capacity than you would have for a football game. And then now you have even more of an issue on the traffic flow throughout the whole stadium.
No, exactly. And, it's like, an insurance geek like me, I agree. I think about those things. You're right. Because now you have, how many thousands of people on the floor, right? Yeah. Or the field, whatever you would like to refer to, that normally for a sporting event aren't, you don't have that attendance capacity, or that number of people that would increase your attendance capacity, that now you have to, account for when you're designing something that, if we have this type of event, do we have enough concessions, restrooms, like you said, walk flow, safety, disaster, or if something were to happen, how do we get all these people out of here safely? All those things.
Yeah. And all those things that if were to happen, and if you don't think about them, they're like, I can't believe you never thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you didn't. Go ahead.
No, so when you were on doing that behind the scenes tour of the San Diego airport, like was that visit to inform, I guess, your advocacy for Turner in terms of what type of policies you were going to get for the project going forward, or had you already done that work and you were kind of just there to see, if there were any other future issues that could come up in the project?
Yeah, it was as more to familiarize myself with the project and the team that I deal with on a daily basis. I deal with the safety team as my direct point of contact over there. And so that was who walked me through the project just to understand, they explained to me all the safety procedures they follow and pointed out, I mean, I saw a million workers, of course, that were, from Turner employees to subtrade, obviously. And, making sure, observing and having that individual who was with me from Turner, a couple, pointing out, the safety protocol they have and how everyone we saw was complying. So that was great. I mean, we saw a lot of people, we didn't see anything that stood out to me like, oh my gosh, this needs to be addressed.
Well, that's
a
really
well-run project and impressive to see, like I said, from top to bottom, from that perspective of, of potential exposures that could happen, which is, what I'm looking for, that they were really doing things the right way.
Yeah. So, you've been in the industry, quite some time. So what are some of the trends you're seeing more recently with construction defect claims?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Yeah. I would say that the things we're seeing is probably going to not be a surprise to you guys. I think it's, you're seeing it across the industry as a whole, but, one of the things that is concerning and that I was kind of heavily involved in a particular claim I had at my prior job was these nuclear verdicts. And I also was involved, which I am here, but also involved in some high level BI exposures there. And we had a fatality that I was involved in Texas, and the plaintiff firm had gotten against that same entity that we insured a few years back, had gotten a very publicized nuclear verdict in that case. So that went to trial, obviously, and that was obviously a driving factor for us because it's the same plaintiff firm. It's a similar scenario. It's a fatality in both cases, and you have to consider those things, even though at face value, these claims are completely different, completely different plaintiffs, completely different potential exposure based on the plaintiff profile and things of that nature. But, you've got this other element here that has got to be considered and come into play. And obviously can drive the value of that claim, very high beyond the realistic, just at face value exposure that you would normally evaluate it at.
So I have a question, but the initial matter that you were saying you got a nuclear verdict on, going into that, what was your, I don't want to say like, what was your counsel advising you, but was it one of those things that like you knew that there was some sort of risk, or I mean, there's always the risk for a nuclear verdict, but like, was it something that took you totally by surprise, or was it one that you're like, okay, this is a chance, but we've offered so much at this point that we have to roll the dice now, we need to go to trial? Like, I'm just curious, like because as an attorney on that side, that would be devastating, right? like if you're like, no, let's roll forward, and you get hit with like some nuclear verdict, and you have to deliver or work with your client on that. It's devastating on the counsel side.
Yeah. On the, and I think this is what you're asking me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but on that initial claim that the verdict came in on, I was not involved in that one. Okay. It was before I was there.
Got it.
But my understanding, because it was discussed so much as a component of the claim I was involved in, as you can understand, is that they felt they had a very strong case. It was a crane collapse, and the crane entity, operator, and such were not enrolled. It was an OSIP claim. We're not enrolled in the OSIP, and they thought they had very good case against them and very good risk transfer. And obviously, it turned out that the jury didn't buy that, and felt that the general contractor was liable for the situation. So
yeah, and I think that is hard. I think it's hard for juries to understand the risk, like the risk transfer, the contractual stuff, because you can't argue it too much because they're just going to go to sleep. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's tough. Yeah, exactly. To keep people engaged and have them understand, because you're talking a lot about contractual language and things of that nature that can bore people, understandably.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, especially to some of these big claims, were just like, this shouldn't have happened. I don't care who is really what the contract is. Like, this person died or whatever, and somebody needs to compensate them. So like, I think it is hard when people are kind of limited in what they're willing to understand. It's like crane collapse. That's a problem. Somebody needs to pay. It's like trying to pull out that story of like why it happened in this particular way and it wasn't this particular entity's fault. I think it can be a challenge.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think oftentimes maybe the understandably to some degree, the jury loses interest in all those minutia arguments of pointing fingers and who's at fault, and they just say, oh my God, this is a horrible tragedy and somebody died. Somebody's got to be punished, I think, and that's obviously the crux of a nuclear verdict, as you guys know, I'm sure, is plaintiff is trying to anger the jury against that plaintiff counsel, against that entity that they're pointing the finger at, and get them to react with a large verdict. And obviously it's working in a lot of cases throughout the country.
And there's certain firms that it seems like this is one of a big player type firm that that you were dealing with. So then on that second claim, I imagine were you valuing the case a little bit higher than you would have typically done given the factual scenario in the prior claim?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. To me, it was such a huge factor, that prior verdict and that, that potential, and that, obviously there was a lot of publicity too. There was a public image issue out there, I think, for this entity at times, and, and how they were perceived from this prior claim. And obviously that was an angle that plaintiff counsel took. Is trying to expose those things that they felt they didn't do right on that project to protect people.
And those things can snowball, right? Because they can snowball and they can pull on heartstrings, and it can really get out of control. I mean, there's firms.
Yeah, exactly. We all know how that goes, right? It's easy to whatever you want to call it, armchair quarterback, or to nitpick, right? I mean, if we all nitpicked our own personal lives day to day, we could find a plethora of things we all do wrong or take shortcuts on that we probably shouldn't. If you want to say this isn't really the right way to do something, but it's you come home safe. And you think, well, maybe I drove a little fast on the way home. I shouldn't have done that. But, things of that, but, it gets amplified in those settings, obviously, where something like that has happened and it's such a public, situation. Yeah.
And what's funny though, but and tell me if you've seen it different, like you too, Kyle, but recently I feel like I've seen a lot more of these large verdicts in places where I wouldn't expect to see them traditionally. Like you hear about, the judicial hellholes, and there's certain jurisdictions that are prone for higher verdicts. But more recently, I've seen some of these really high verdicts in like counties that I've traditionally always been like, oh, that's a little more defense friendly county, and that's more conservative. And I'm just seeing, I am seeing a rise in. Are both of you seeing that on your end?
I mean, for me, in terms in New York, like just on the legal side, I mean, I don't think I've seen much of that as of yet. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see how kind of the broader climate, change in terms of like distrust in certain like companies, entities, institutions, how that could translate into the courtroom for juries, in places that you might otherwise think are defense for. Like I interested to see if like places like out here like in Suffolk County in Long Island or places further upstate away from this New York City, if there are depending on the nature of the plaintiff, obviously of the defendant, if maybe you think, oh, they're more defensive, they're not going to care about, they're not really care about the person's sob story. Well, no, maybe in this case they do. Or sometimes a big thing in where we are in Richmond County, which is Staten Island, is historically a pretty defense-friendly firm, specifically in the confines of the 5 boroughs in New York City. Except if you're a firefighter or a police officer, then it almost becomes like the Bronx, which is like very friendly towards that type of plaintiff. But so far, at least for me, I don't think I've seen anything eye-popping as of yet, and hopefully won't anytime soon. We'll see. Well, what about you, Walter?
Yeah, what are you seeing out west?
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing, even in venues that I would say, California is a perfect example, that are traditionally very liberal, throughout the years. I still see things that are surprising to me in the sense of the evaluation and the verdicts that are coming down, even non-nuclear, I'm talking, where, you see a broken arm that, you used to be able to settle for, well under $100,000 years ago with just the standard, broken, it got fixed, everything's fine. There's no long-term, issues for the person. Now these things are approaching 500 grand, in verdicts and evaluations. It's just kind of silly to me. But I would say the biggest change I've seen from a conservative to a more liberal, I'll say, venue is throughout Texas over the years.
Yeah.
And Texas has definitely seen a change. Even the border towns were always, more on the liberal side and such. And so that wasn't so surprising, but the Dallas area, for example, has gotten a lot more liberal in their verdicts, in their judges, and such. So that's the one that's kind of the most standout, surprising to me.
Yeah. Texas comes out quite a bit. I hear people complain about Texas a lot. It's like Texas, Louisiana, Florida, California.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess don't mess with Texas, I guess. Huh?
Definitely. It's bigger all around now.
Yeah. And that was fascinating because even Meghan, the other states you mentioned, it's like, kind of separating out like, the claims, the legal world versus like, I guess the more cold cultural political world. Like it's states you wouldn't expect, right? A lot. If you were just a normal person, you wouldn't expect like, oh, you'd expect states like that to be more conservative or defense friendly. Maybe they have like, you'd think they'd have like tort reform statutes that are favorable, but they end up not having that. And it's just interesting to see that dynamic play out.
For sure.
So I wanted to touch on this too, because you and I had talked about this, I don't know, over the years, I should say. But throughout your career, you've had to work with outside counsel quite a bit. And I remember when we talked about this originally, you had a few things to say about outside counsel and the good, the bad, and the ugly. But so, if you were to give when you were managing outside counsel, which I think you're doing a little less now, but what are some of the things that you are looking for when you were hiring an attorney for your claims?
Yeah, I would say the first thing for me is communication and collaboration. I've worked with a lot of different attorneys in a lot of different venues over the years, and one of the things that has always bothered me is someone who just kind of runs rogue, looking you gave me the claim. Now I can go do whatever I want with it and just tell you what I'm doing, rather than, working with you in a collaborative way, and to reach that outcome. I would say, being prepared and efficient as well throughout the process of the claim handling, or the defense litigation, and looking at the matter, from day one, in how you're, prepping it, from the very get-go for a settlement path,
Right.
Rather than just going through the motions per se, and that just makes the claim rep's job, so much easier, and is actually, aside from that, to me, is how I believe how, these claims should be approached from a litigation standpoint, is because that's what we're trying to do, right? We all want to settle them one way or the other. We really don't want things going to trial. You don't see many construction claims go to trial for various reasons, but you want to settle them, and you want to be efficient with it, and you want to limit your costs and limit your exposure, and get them closed.
Right. Yeah, and that I mean, we talk about, I feel like we talk about this all the time on the show, just generally at our firm, but it's that is a complaint I hear quite often, like just the blind, like just putting the foot in front of the other and just checking off the boxes because the boxes can be checked, rather than coming up with a plan and being like, okay, we see our exit strategy as Y, so what do we need to do to get to Y, and what needs to happen, not everything that we can do. I mean, you could do a lot of things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing that drives me more crazy than, you get on the phone and it's like, you kind of almost know sometimes with certain firms or certain people, like what you're going to hear. And it's like, okay, well, like you said, it feels like a real check the box mentality. We need to go out and hire these 4 experts, and it's like, well, wait, do we really? Are we just going through the motions of the standard approach, or are we taking a look at this outside the box? Maybe, is this something, is there an opportunity here? We should look at every claim that way. Is that, is there not, instead of, like we're always told, you got to look at each claim individually, and not just go, oh, it's another this, so we just do this, and that. Right. Always looking for a chance to like I said, approach it maybe in a more unique way that can get it resolved quicker, or get it, save your costs on it. Risk transfer is always huge. Working with your especially counsel on that. There's nothing worse than, you have that, hey, I want you to tender to these people. And then 3 months later, you get that status report, and it's like, well, you don't speak about risk transfer here. Oh, I haven't sent any tenders out yet. Or
the clock starts ticking on the letter.
Exactly. The one that always drove me crazy is, oh, well, I don't want to tender to them until we can confirm they actually have exposure. And it's like, no, tender to them right from the get-go. If they don't have any exposure, we'll walk away from that tender. But that's going to take so long to determine those things. Like you said, the clock is ticking. We want that AI exposure potential, or especially in that situation, to start from day one. When they get that tender, not 6 months later, when it's like, oh yeah, boy, they are implicated. We should have brought them in earlier.
Whoops.
Yeah.
And then you have to wonder, like, is it like, because that's like such an easy thing to look at from the very first day. That's the first, because that is the easiest out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to wonder, like, why weren't you looking to tender this from day zero? Because there's a contract.
Right.
Like, what does it say?
Yeah. And oftentimes too, the funny thing to me is, if you're really looking for some smoking gun as to their scope of work, it's like, oftentimes we get brought in, without a smoking gun, and this attorney's defending us. And I'm like, well, they haven't even given us any details on what they think our issues are. So why are we not just passing that along for now and letting everyone figure it out throughout the process, rather than waiting to see if we can figure it out and then decide who else should be involved.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, like in these construction claims, there's always so many entities involved. And the more, I feel like the more, especially if you have multiple policies, the more entities you have involved, the more expensive it is, because there's gonna be more depths and there's gonna be more of everything. So if you like, it's just a bleed. And of course, it's not always so easy. Like there isn't always that easy tender opportunity, and sometimes you have to run through all these steps, and sometimes it is a muckety muck total mess. That does happen. It happens a lot, but if you could at least at the outset try to identify a way to get out of this, fast and easy or fast and early, obviously that's ideal.
Right. No, exactly. And I'm not someone who has ever been of the mindset that I'm going to hold somebody hostage if they don't belong in the case. So like I said, I mean, if it comes out that, we get them, we tender to them, we get information down the road that they have no implication here in their scope as to any of the issues at hand, I'm happy to dismiss people from cases.
Yeah.
I'm not going to just keep them in because, it's another couple $1,000 we can extract from somebody.
Yeah.
No. If they don't belong, they don't belong.
Yeah.
But,
although I'm currently being held hostage in a case.
It happens. Absolutely.
And I keep trying, I don't want to spend the money on a summary judgment motion because you should just let me out. But I'm getting to the point, I'm like, well, now I'm going to have to file one because they just go ignored.
Yeah. Well, especially if you have the AI, right? Then you're held hostage. You can have the smallest, most, non-implicated sub that literally will have $1,000 of baloney on a cost of repair that's related to their scope of work, but they're not going to let you out because you're paying the defense fees and costs of the builder or the developer. That's the one that's so frustrating when you're on that end of it.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I didn't want to end this though without bringing this up, because in our pre-podcast chat, you were mentioning music, and you mentioned music at the beginning of that. You would, it was one of your passions, and Kyle really perked up when we started talking about music, and I want to give him his moment too. So you were saying you're really into classic rock. Is that what you're?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with two older sisters who were 7 and 8 years older than me, who were, introduced me to a lot of music at a very young age that was beyond my age group per se at the time. So classic rock, my bread and butter when I was growing up for my own generation was hard rock, heavy metal. So I love that, that scene, that music. Been to a lot of concerts. So it's a real passion of mine.
Is that you too, Kyle?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I can kind of picture it with you.
That's no, and you're from. You grew up in Northern California, right?
Southern, actually, yeah.
Oh, Southern. Okay, yeah. So you have like the LA scene down there. A lot of lots of music, right? On the Sunset Strip and all that. Stuff. It's a fertile ground for all sorts of heavy music and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean my quote unquote claim to fame in that regard is I lived in Orange County, just south of Los Angeles, southeast, in the 80s. And so I specifically I'm talking the mid to late 80s. I saw Guns N' Roses play 1 and 2,000 seat venues 5 times during that time, in their infancy, but they, Appetite had already come out, but they hadn't blown up yet. So they were, they weren't a big band yet, but that album was out and everybody knew how good it was. And they were a phenomenal live band back then to see them. I mean, they were just amazing. And I have a lot of good memories of those shows.
That must have been made because again, it's still that the performances as they are, and Axl doing his thing and Slash everybody, but it's still kind of more underground. There's not as much of the ego yet, where he's like missing shows and all that. Like he's showing up at least, to play at the Whiskey, right, with the Rainbow, right, or places in Orange County. But that's really
cool. Exactly. I was the last time I saw them. And it was in that era. It was 1989. Was they? Now they were huge by then, and they opened in Los Angeles at the Coliseum for the Rolling Stones.
Oh, wow.
For 4 nights. And I was lucky enough or unlucky enough to be there on the very first night. And that's there's all kinds of YouTube videos of this, where that's the night that Axl was about an hour and a half late. And I've read a couple of their autobiographies, and they literally say that from band members and managers that they had to send the LAPD to his house to get him. He was refusing to show up. That's how bad it was that night. And so they finally got him over there, but and then he was just in a very bad mood, and he kind of threw a fit on stage, and there's video of him going into this, this speech and rant about everything going on in the band and in the public eye with respect to them. And it was quite entertaining, but like I said, it was kind of an infamous show, and I was at that one. So
as someone who really has no clue about any of this, so was that? I mean, I obviously know Gus versus and Axl Rose, but like, was that like his pattern? Like he would have like a little fit and just not want to come, or was it like a substance issue, or both, or we don't know?
He was. My understanding is he was just quite temperamental. More so, I don't believe honestly that it was really a substance issue or anything of that nature. He had a lot of he had a bad childhood, is my understanding, and had a lot of anger. I think he would acknowledge it inside, and so it kind of came out through these fits at times, of just being frustrated with band members, or frustrated with public image about them, or criticism of things he had said, or his position on various topics, or what have you, and he would just go off verbally about it. Yeah. And then he was late. He was notoriously late to when they, especially obviously when they were huge, to shows, where sometimes hours, literally, not just an hour and a half, like 3 hours late, they would start from their scheduled time because of him. So
there's another big show. I think when they were touring with Metallica, they were co-headliner, I think in in Montreal, like the early 90s. And like, that's one where James Hetfield got like burned with the pyro, so they had to cut them short. And then he also was then like, I don't want to go out. All this stuff's crazy. And then it was like a riot, like at the venue. Like the people were like upset that they were not getting any of their show, and it was like a big deal. Like, at least that didn't happen for you. So.
Right? No, exactly.
Then you really got to worry about crowd flow at that point, right? With the
oh yeah.
You got a bunch of like hard rock headbanger dudes getting really upset.
Yeah. No, I actually was at a show in 1988 at the Monsters of Rock at the Coliseum in Los Angeles. It was an all-day festival kind of a show, and it was actually early at that point in Metallica's career. They played that, but they were the second band of like 6. So to show you how early it was in their career, but they were very popular, especially in Los Angeles already. And there's video of this on YouTube there. The sound went out, ironically, during Metallica's set, and they were, they were trying to fix it, and the crowd got very restless, and there was almost a riot at that show. Thank God I was far enough back that it didn't really, it was more on the floor. I wasn't on the floor, thank God, but it was pretty scary. Yeah.
Yeah, this didn't happen at those Dave Matthews shows that I went to.
I do that too, and he's a good performer too. Different vibe, but
a little different.
Yeah. Those are a little more peaceful.
A little laid back.
But I did love him. That was. But anyway, well, Walter, thank you so much for joining us. I think we could probably, as we said ahead of time, we could probably talk for like a whole hour about. Or I could just let you two talk about music, and you could just inform me. But thank you so much for finally coming on. I'm so glad that we were able to make this happen. I feel like we barely even scratched the surface of what we intended to talk about. We just ran out of time. So your open invitation to come back another time. We could finish up like the 16 other points I think I had on my notes that we just didn't get to today. But as always, thank you so much for joining us. To our listeners out there, if you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to Claims Never Sleep. You can find us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also find us on YouTube. And thanks for tuning in.
This is the Claims Never Sleep podcast, presented by Cruiser Mitchell, with your host, Meghan Henry.